What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Lab, our MLB series previews that we're going to be doing. This is episode 2. First one that we're doing is a preview of the weekend, so super excited for that. First episode, we had plenty of pretty solid calls, so I guess, for the outlook of those series. I wasn't tapped into BTL every single day this week, so going through that really helped me, and we had some pretty good angles, some unders in Boston in the Rays Red Sox series, some runs in the D-backs Red series, faded the Royals bats, quite a few. So W recap there. Looking forward to some of these matchups. I don't know if I like the slate of series as much as I did earlier this week, but I think we still have some pretty solid matchups that we can talk through. So why not just hop straight into it? And before we go over the individual matchups, which I know you see 5 on the screen, but don't worry, we have, all of them ready to go here just on different graphics. I do want to give a quick bullpen overview because that's something a couple people asked me to do going into the series. So there are a couple bullpens that are a little compromised from the series that they just got out of, which is pretty important when you're looking at a series in its entirety, especially coming into this first game pertaining to, teams without off days. So big fallout, I would say, is this Mets-Phillies series, which you see the usage for the Mets. I mean, they consolidated it decently well into 4 guys, but those 4 guys happen to be Diekman, Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, and Adam Ottavino, easily their top 4 options in the bullpens. So they are playing the Marlins, and we'll talk about that a little more, but if we get into a situation where they're needed, at high leverage situations, I'm not 100% sure who of those 4 guys is going to be available. But maybe a little concerning if you get into the back half of the game. You do have the Marlins bullpen on the other side, so maybe that helps. So they're on the first side of that. The Phillies is also on the more concerning side here too, because they had same amount of pitches pretty much, but everybody in the bullpen threw Kerkering, Hoffman, Alvarado, Soto. You can probably guess that you're going to see Dominguez at some point today. So again, I guess what's on their side a little more is they have ZAC Wheeler, who has been fantastic and just king innings eater, pitching for them and on the mound today. So hopefully he gives them some depth in this game because they really, really need it. And if he doesn't, this could get pretty interesting, especially considering that the Nationals bullpen on the other side has been a lot better than a lot of people have expected. So Mets-Phillies extra inning game yesterday definitely had its effects. Same with, not that it was extra innings, but Rays Red Sox. Really throughout this entire series, whether it was the Rays pitchers or the Red Sox pitchers, like both of these lineups in that 4-game series made life really tough. So there were a lot of pitching out PODs for really the entirety of the 4 games. I saw Houck a bunch. I saw Taj Bradley a bunch. I don't even know if he ended up hitting, but a lot of pitchers were inefficient in the starting pitching realm, which that led to a lot of bullpen usage, as you can see here with both of these teams, especially coming off yesterday. The entire Red Sox bullpen pretty much pitched. A lot of these guys have also pitched 2 times in 3 days. The Rays, a little better of a situation. Kevin Kelly pitches pretty much every game for them for whatever reason. He's probably going to be unavailable today. Jason Adam, a good amount of pitches. We'll see if he's available. Clevenger is a platoon guy. We'll see if he's available. He probably will be in the right situation. So I'm not as worried about the Rays, or I would be a little more worried if there are more guys pitching or, they're in a little different of a situation. I will say they do have Tyler Alexander on the mound, who has given them some depth into games, but who knows how long that can last because he is a converted reliever. So that worries me a little bit, but the Red Sox is the most concerning out of those 2. And then the last one would definitely be the Reds. Had to spot start a bullpen game yesterday with Nick Martinez as the bulk guy. He went 5 innings. They opened with, I believe, Suter for a couple hitters, then Pagan for a couple hitters, and they went to Justin Wilson for a batter, and the rest fell out kind of as it may. But yeah, whole bullpen was used around Nick Martinez yesterday. Again, kind of like the Phillies, not as much because Frankie Montas is not ZAC Wheeler, but he's been a pretty solid innings eater for them. So if he can be just somewhat efficient against the Dodgers, which after yesterday is a super tough ask, they could be in a decent spot. But if they do have some high leverage bullpen situations a little earlier than they want, a Dodgers live bets once the bullpen comes in is probably not a bad idea. So those are the ones to look out for, I would say. I'm down to hop right into these series. We can start with Nationals Phillies. And a lot of these projected starters, probable starters, a lot of them are weird. Not necessarily in this series. I believe everybody's confirmed, but across the league, probably more unconfirmed probable starters than usual. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to talk about the pitcher more so than the game itself. So pay attention to the particular matchups, I guess I'm pointing out. And if somebody ends up not starting and they change pitchers, so be it. But can start here with the Nats Phillies. Phillies are on a ridiculous roll. I believe they're 11-2 in May, so I don't have much interest in fading them in this series. I guess if I were going to do it, it would have to be with Mackenzie Gore on the mound. They are not as good against lefties as I guess you would kind of think. They are striking out a little bit too, which we'll talk about when we talk about another matchup. But strikeout stuff could be there for Mackenzie Gore, who's going to be facing Christopher Sanchez in that matchup. On the other side, you got Jake Irvin going game 1, Trevor Williams going game 3. Sorry, Williams has been fantastic. Irvin's been much better than expected. I just don't really have any interest in fading the Phillies in this series, especially at home where the bats, I think, can get going against a couple of these pitchers. So I'm really just good on this series, to be honest with you. Can just go ahead and move to the next one. White Sox, Yankees, another one with like really weird starters. Mike Clevenger, Cortez, I believe, is pretty set for today for game 1, but I've seen rumors of Brad Keller for tomorrow, which is who I currently see as the probable starter listed. But I've also heard rumors of Michael Soroka. If it's Michael Soroka going game 2, the Yankees are probably going to destroy him. And this whole series, I will say, because the Yankees are coming off of a series where they just swept the Twins in dominant fashion. I believe the combined score is 14-1, and not that the pitching staff shouldn't get their credit for the Yankees, but they're going up against solid starters. Joe Ryan, even though he's had his moments, giving up hits, giving up home runs, he did to start that start, but he's still a really good pitcher. They faced Pablo Lopez as a part of that too. Really impressive series from the Yankees. And the only reason why I'm not all in on just putting this kind of like I thought with the Rays, I don't know if you guys caught that on BTL, but the Rays going into the White Sox series after they faced them for the second time, not the time in Chicago, but when they came back to the Trop, I just thought they're going to dominate some games of those series, which I believe they did. They won 2 or 3 really handily, and then they ended up losing the last one. I would think the same thing with the Yankees here. My only concern, just in the back of my brain, is feels like you're buying them at their highest point, and I'm getting flashbacks of the A's series in Yankee Stadium where kind of a similar situation. They're coming in playing good ball against a team who, yes, we now know that the A's are a little better than the White Sox are, but at the time they weren't that much better. So that happened, and the Yankees bats fell flats. Everybody was on Yankees -1.5 every single game, and it was a struggle to watch that because the offense was painful. Maybe we get that for a game in this series. I don't want to attack game 1, so I can kind of find that out, but if it ends up being Soroka game 2, even if it stays Keller, love that matchup. I do have to say for the White Sox, though, and I'll pull this up while we talk about it. One of the things that people sneakily don't realize, because they're awful against left-handed pitching, just absolutely borderline awful. But if you do go to what they've been doing lately, I guess you could say for the entirety of the season, but against right-handed pitching, they're not striking out very much, which I'll pull this up for a sample size of May. Let's just call it that. Get this off the screen. In May, lowest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching, only 17%. So I will say game 2 just happens to be the one time they're facing a righty in Luis Gil, who is pretty dependent on strikeout stuff. He throws fast, really elite stuff, but doesn't know where it's going. So the walks are going to be there. If the strikeouts aren't there too, maybe a little concerning. That could be a solid overplay if you feel pretty confident about him giving up some runs in that game too. But from a pitching perspective or from a hitting perspective, I think their bats are going to do really well against really whether it's Soroka, whether it's Brad Keller, or even if it turns to Chris Flexen, who's actually been somewhat decent and a lot better than people have expected the last couple starts out. So I'm going to kind of wait to see how this first game goes tonight with Clevenger and Cortez. If the Yankees bats kind of continue playing like they're playing, I'm going to continue to ride the wave with them to win a couple games Saturday and Sunday pretty comfortably. So those are my thoughts on that series. Next one up, Mariners-Orioles. Now this one's weird because As you can see by the probable starters I have listed here, there's not much that's for sure yet about this Orioles starting rotation of what they're going to deploy. The only thing that we know is John Means is going to be pitching tonight, who, I don't know, he's had a weird little return, but he has a lefty facing the Mariners, which is definitely their worst splits. And they've shown some life against them recently, though. I will say that. Their numbers are really weird. The strikeouts are going to be there, which is pretty important for a guy like John Means, because he kind of needs that, needs some whiffs. But other than that, the Orioles, I think they have Corbin Burns, Cole Irvin, Dean Kramer, and then I think Grayson Rodriguez is scheduled to return. They can utilize him this weekend if they want to. I would assume the decision for those 4 guys is kind of looming and is why we see the Saturday and Sunday starters not quite confirmed yet. So depending on what they do, I mean, I would love to back Cole Irvin if that happens to be the Saturday or Sunday starter, I guess. Just because I think I love that lefty matchup against the Mariners bats, but it's kind of hard to talk about the series with what's going on right now. Say from the Orioles bats perspective, they've been a little lackluster lately. Like they've had their moments late in games, they've had their moments with pop, but as far as consistently hitting pitchers, I don't know if I've really seen that yet. And for Luis Castillo and Kirby, I guess a lot of the Mariners bullpen kind of falls under the same umbrella where you want to get after them with lefty power bats. You can say that the Orioles have those. Like Adley's been on a tear recently. Obviously, they have Tony Taters in the lineup, Gunnar Henderson in the lineup. O'Hearn will be platooned in a way that I'm sure he'll make a pretty big impact in some of the series. So they have the bats, especially if we're talking about Luis Castillo, who's my favorite guy to target, like in those situations, even though he's been really, really good. So I could see the bats getting to them in this series. So it's definitely a pretty strong Orioles lean for me in the series. The only thing that's preventing that or preventing me from taking action now on that is the probable starters being kind of held up in the air. I'll say this too, because super glad that we have these up, or some of them at the very least up for this episode here. Can zoom in so you guys can see that a little clearer, but the Orioles are sitting minus 155 for the series, which, to be honest with you, I know it's in Baltimore, but if we're talking about the Bryce Miller, Luis Castillo, George Kirby rotation coming up against a rotation of Orioles that we really don't know who it's going to be yet, and they're still hanging minus 155, that feels awfully telling. Even if that does end up being like a Corbin Burns start included in there, they're still going to be like a relatively short favorite. So yeah, that price feels awfully telling to me, especially after what we just saw the Mariners pitching staff do to everybody's favorite darling, the Royals bats. So I do think they win the series. Am I going to lay that minus 155? No, because I don't know the starters yet, but I'll keep an eye on that from a game-to-game basis and probably play them in that manner. On to the next. Rays Jays. Got to give my Rays fan thoughts in this one because talked about it. I was a little nervous about them in the last series, which all those games were really close. I mean, I guess I had a little bit of reason to be nervous, but I was nervous about the bats. We targeted 2 of the unders in the series, the 2 that actually hit. Game 1 and game 3, which game 1 legacy under, but that's for a conversation for another day. Game 2, I think, push, and then game 4 went over late game heroics. That was crazy. But the Rays are going into Toronto now, which from a fan perspective, these games always get weird. There's always a really weird pitching performance where somebody gets blown up that shouldn't. And then there's a dueling masterclass, I guess, the next day. So nervous as a fan for this series too. I've been waiting for this series going on the road against the AL East because the Rays have been hitting better. Like the lineup's coming together when they all set it up the right way. I mean, they just took 3 or 4 from the Sox in Fenway, which even though the Sox are kind of in a tailspin, at least offensively, I thought that was pretty impressive. But the lineup's coming together, situational hitting so much better. They brought Jonathan Aranda up, who he looks comfortable at the plate. Josh Lowe has been great. Had a couple of home runs in the series against the Red Sox. Whenever they have no Alex Jackson in the lineup, it is fantastic. Ben Rortvedt is so much better. So, I mean, the lefties have been the difference. That was one of the reasons why they've struggled to this point. So to have this balance in the lineup is made all the difference. But on a game-to-game basis here, Tyler Alexander, who is a lefty who doesn't have elite strikeout stuff going up against the Jays, that scares me a little bit for game 1 because If you pay attention to the Jays at all, left-handed pitching has clearly been their best split. So they've been able to put out these platoon lineups that include like Danny Jansen and David Schneider, and they've been huge additions in the middle of that order. So the offense hasn't been necessarily like dynamic for them by any means, but when you have that combined with the fact that Bo Bichette's seeing the ball so much better, Vladdy is starting to get red hot, which is scary. A lefty matchup right out of the gate is a little concerning for me. So game one, I can tell you I will not be back in the Rays, even though, and I guess this applies to maybe two of the pitchers in this category or in the series here. The Rays have been really good at hitting ground ball pitchers, which I don't know if Bassett technically qualifies, but he wants to be a ground ball pitcher. Same with Manoah. In game three, he is a sinker baller who tries to get the ball on the ground, but his stuff is so bad for the last year and a half that he's not able to do it. So Bassett's a guy that the Rays have randomly seen like decently well at times. So wouldn't be surprised if they get some runs off of him. But the Tyler Alexander matchup, even though he's like really impressed me over really all season, I guess you could say, outside of maybe the first couple appearances, I'm a little worried for him on Friday or today in game one. Shout out Pega. I think he told me to touch on Eflin Gosman a little bit because I think this is a pretty interesting matchup too. Eflin, he struggles against like righties that can't keep the ball on the ground. So when I think about the guys for the Jays, it's a lot of soft contact, a lot of hit balls on the ground, a lot of just weak hits. So like a guy like Eflin could pitch pretty well for the duration of it. But the thing with Zach Eflin is similar to the thing with Savali. He can have 4 shutout innings, and then he comes out and gives up a turkey. The home run ball, it's bitten him in the ass, just like it's bitten a couple of these Rays starters really all season. So in that game two, I do think he pitches decently well and gives up the home run. But then we talk about Gosman, which this is different because Gosman, I want to bring up his splits real quick to show you guys because it's pretty important when we're talking about Kevin Gosman. He gets hurt by lefties pretty clearly, but he gets hurt by a specific type of lefty. So when we go to what's really been killing him, obviously he's given up 338 to lefties just compared to 257 against righties. You see the slugging difference there too. I don't know why it keeps pulling up, but I want to go to the specific teams that have hurt him. Like we're talking about the Twins. I think everybody got burned by that series or in that game by that series or by that pitching performance, from Kevin Gosman. Then the Rockies, another one. Those are pretty public play. And then the Yankees. So a couple things that are pretty important about those couple teams. And I can bring that up while we're here too. Let me sort this real quick on the back end to include all year. Bang. ISO. So basically he gets hurt by a lot of isolated power teams with that, which for those who don't know what that means, that's just basically pop. Like if you're going to have a team that gets a lot of base hits like the Rays, they're not going to be a team that kind of bangs like the Twins. The Twins are much more strikeout, home run. The Rays, not as much. So the teams that have hurt Gosman, you have the Yankees up here, 3rd in ISO. You have the Twins up here, 7th in ISO against right-handed pitching. The Rockies are a little bit of a outlier here at 20th, and they're so low partially because the guys that have in a big addition to that, aka Nolan Jones, Ryan McMahon, Brendan Rodgers, like those guys have missed plenty of time. And funny enough, those are the exact guys that hurt Kevin Gosman in that start against the Rockies. I think all of them did a majority of the damage, maybe contributed over half of his runs, maybe more than that. But yeah, so what you really want is a lot of power from the left side, especially against Kevin Gosman. And look at the Rays down here at 28th. So as much as the Rays are a little more balanced in the lineup, like now they have Josh Lowe in the lineup, like I talked about. Aranda, Palacios is in the lineup. I assume Ben Rortvedt is going to be in the lineup against Gosman. The lefty balance is there a little more so now than it was earlier in the season, but a lot of those guys are singles hitters. Like they're not guys that are going to go out and butter you with power. So for Kevin Gosman, I think that's a pretty solid matchup for him. So in all likelihood, I might be backing him. Kind of tough to do that as a Rays fan in this game, but I do think it's a decent matchup for him, even though they've already seen him. I believe he went 4 1/3 in that first matchup against the Rays, if I'm not mistaken. It was the first game of the season. Yeah. Gave up one, was on a little bit of a restriction, but yeah, strikeouts were there, pitched pretty well. Much different lineup though, so can't really use that too much. And then going back to last game of the series, Manoah Savali. I'm going to fade Alek Manoah. Just had a good start, uncharacteristically for the first time in a while, which I guess you could say kind of the same thing about Alek Manoah, just in the opposite sense, because I don't want to go back to last year necessarily, but if you look at the teams that hurt him, it's kind of the opposite as Kevin Gausman. It is the teams that are able to butter you with base hits pretty consistently and then, get the bloop and get the blast to kind of set it over the top. So like we saw him get destroyed by the Nationals, that kind of did that. And then, the Twins really struggled, which their strikeout or home run. So even though they got the through on home run, it was a little defense aided. It was, unearned, whatever you want to call it. But they struggled for a majority of that against Alek Manoah. So today, I think it's going to be a little more of the same. So all of that to say, I am going to be backing the Rays bats to get after Manoah. I don't know if I want to cut off Savali, though, either, because same with Eflin. Like I was talking about, he can have a really good start, but the home run ball seemed to bite him, which I don't know, a couple of Rays pitchers that kind of scarred me from what we've seen in Toronto. So I think he gives up some runs to the Blue Jays as well, probably to one of the guys like Bo or Vlad. He was really starting to get hot. So an over in game 3, the Sunday game of that series, is definitely something I'm going to be targeting and get me involved with some Rays against Manoah as well. Twins Guardians, a series I really don't have too many thoughts on. I do think guys like Simeon Woods Richardson, who's going game 1, could have a little bit of trouble against the guards who are super patient, could force them into some walks, could force them into deep counts, which is where he hasn't really been put against the teams who have he's pitched really well against. So have my concerns about him, but Tristan McKenzie on the other side, I really don't want to back either. Guy's pitching with a torn ligament in his elbow like he has all season. I don't know why that seemed to be a good idea, or I don't know who told him to do that, but results have shown he's looked a little better, I guess, recently, just a tad better, but it's hard to look worse than he did first, to start the season. So, I mean, I do think Woods Richardson can get tapped up a little bit. Probably same with Logan Allen, who's just been an absolute barrel machine. I say that every time about him, and he's been really, really bad. So for a Twins team, we're like, yeah, you probably want a righty who's a barrel machine to face this team. I still think Logan Allen's going to give them plenty of chances as well. Same could go for Tanner Bybee, who his fastball has taken a significant dip. If you look at the stuff numbers or stuff plus numbers throughout this season, it's been bad. He's throwing it higher in the zone and it's getting absolutely crushed. So that could be another spot for the Twins bats to really perk up. So I don't know. This is a weird series. Definitely a game-to-game series where we're targeting maybe the guards bats in game 1, or at least fading Woods Richardson in some form. But the Twins bats in Saturday and Sunday games definitely pique my interest. But nothing more, nothing less. We can get to the next set of series. The rest of them I'm going to go through a little quicker just because I don't have as many thoughts, except for right here with Mets Marlins. Another one of these weird series where I know there's going to be short lines. I think the margin for error is extremely small because we're going to see 7.5, maybe 8 totals for the entirety of the series. These are not 2 electric offenses. So a little weird. Plus I talked about the Mets bullpen being in a pretty vulnerable position starting tonight. And the matchups that we have: Christian Scott against Luzardo, Severino against Garrett, Sean Manaea against Sanchez, Sixto Sanchez. So can talk about the Mets really quickly because they were my little wagon against lefties earlier in the season. They were kind of hanging out in the top 10. Now you look where they are and they're 21st. So there's been a pretty significant dip in production from them against left-handed pitching. They're just downright awful right now. But the one thing that hasn't changed is their strikeout rate. You can see where they are. 4th lowest strikeout rate, just 19% against lefties, which is pretty important because the guys they're going against are Jesus Luzardo and Braxton Garrett, who, if they can't strike guys out, they're very dependent on that, very dependent on whiffs, very dependent on chases. Their life becomes really difficult up on the mound. So These are two guys who are making their second starts back from their little IL stints. I believe both of them are on that same track, and their first start back was against the Phillies, where both of them looked pretty decent. I mean, Luzardo had a strong start. Braxton Garrett, I think, gave up a couple, but I think both of them had 8 strikeouts. I could be mistaken on that, but there's a reason why, because I talked about the Mets strikeout rate, and the Phillies, while they're just an overall better offense, very obviously in the Mets, especially against left-handed pitching, they still have the 5th highest K rate against lefties in the league. So Luzardo and Garrett are strikeout dependent guys. So like when you talk about, I don't know, where you expect them to be successful, even against a good offense, is against a team that strikes out against lefties a lot. So the Mets don't have as much pop down there, but that's what they don't do. So I think in one of these 2 starts, we see one of these guys get tapped up. And I think in both starts, the Mets are going to make life tough on these starters, and maybe they're a little inefficient. Maybe they're struggling to command the zone because the Mets are being patient or putting the ball in play and not striking out. I think I have a little more confidence in fading the left-handed starter when we talk about Saturday with Braxton Garrett than I do against Luzardo, because I do think he's still going to have a pretty decent start. And this is game 1 with Christian Scout on the mound and the bullpen in a vulnerable spot like I was talking about. So I think Luzardo has a tough time tonight, but Braxton Garrett in that game 2, I think that's where we see the solo shots from a couple of the Mets. It also helps too. I talked about this with Casey Mize going up against the Marlins last episode. Big time ground ball guy. So if we talk about what do the Marlins do against right-handed pitching, they're right up there at the top by a really big margin, almost a 51% ground ball rate. So what is Luis Severino, who's pitching on Saturday against Braxton Garrett, what has he done all season? Well, I'll tell you, because there's a pretty big reason why he's been so successful, and it's that massive red bar right there, 89th percentile ground ball rate. So I think he has a really solid day. That's my favorite time to target the Mets. I do still like them in game 1, but this is the game that I would certainly look to attack here against the Marlins. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that series. I don't have too much on these next couple series as a whole. Padres Braves. The one thing like I will say about the Padres Braves series is this is a 4-game series that carries over to Monday. I am not sure if Chris Sale is confirmed for the Monday game quite yet, but that's what it's seeming like it's lining up to be. And man, the Padres have just been bad against left-handed pitching. Kind of the opposite of the Mets, where they're kind of my wagon just for not striking out against left-handed pitching. But now, I mean, the entirety of the season, they're sitting 24th against left-handed pitching with just a 83 WRC plus. I can pull it up right here. Yeah, they've just been downright terrible. So, I mean, the guys that they're going to see, you're going to see Max Fried game 1 started tonight, and then you're going to very likely see Chris Sale coming on Monday. So those are 2 times that I think the Padres bats are going to be in for a little bit of trouble. The Braves bats have not really done much to inspire lately either. So like, even though they're facing Waldron tonight, I wouldn't mind targeting an under there. Like I don't know. This feels like a series with pretty good pitching, which good pitching for these teams could really just mean the bats are pretty lackluster, but I would definitely watch out for Fried and Sale to have really good starts against this Padres team, just like pretty much every lefty who has faced them has. That's pretty much all I got there. A's Royals. I did talk about this series a little bit, or these teams a little bit on the last series preview. I told you it was Judgment Day on the Royals bats. I've been screaming from the rooftops that their bats are dead. Their insanity run is over as an offense. And really, like, the time they had to prove it was in Seattle against a really good pitching staff. If they even showed a pulse, I would have said, you know what, maybe this team has a little bit left in the tank, but they didn't. They got brutally shut down for 2 of those 3 games. And in reality, take out 1 inning of the, I believe it was game 2 where they won. The offense was dead for pretty much the entire series. Now, is that a tough situation to go in for any team in Seattle, pitcher's ballpark against really good pitching? Yes, but if you're an offense that's on the rise and you want some respect, you got to prove it. They didn't. So the Royals bats, I'll still be on fading. I don't know if this is the spot though, because same with the Royals, the A's kind of feels like their insanity run's coming to an end too. Some of that's with the pitching staff, some of that's just with the bats, because the bats for them have looked relatively dead over the past really week and a half or so. think that continues. And to be honest with you, I really don't want to hop on the train with Kyle Mueller or Ross Stripling on my side in game 1 or game 2. So yeah, I have no interest in buying stock in any one of these teams. I guess at this point, it's just who's in a bigger tailspin. Obviously, the Royals are the better team, but wouldn't mind a really good start from Reagans in game 1. Other than that, have little to no interest in getting involved in this series. I guess kind of same goes for Angels Rangers, this next series up here, which talk about the Rangers, their offense is in a tailspin because this, from what we've seen from them, I mean, brutal performance against the Guardians, good pitching staff, sure, but they had Carlos Carrasco an out away from finishing 5 scoreless against them, and really everybody else for the Guardians just absolutely shoved. And then obviously the series that we talked about earlier last week or last weekend, they got blanked by the Rockies pretty much. No offense, got swept in those games. The offense hasn't looked much better. Corey Seager, I guess, looks a tad better at the plate as of recent, but other than that, not much else to look forward to. What could be the recipe for success for them, though? They happen to be facing the worst bullpen in the league. And it seems like these games and the totals in these games between the Angels and Rangers are always like sharp. You always see like 9 totals, and you're like, these pitchers are going to get blown up. I'm not so sure that the pitchers are going to get blown up in these matchups, or the starting pitchers at the very least, because we do have Tyler Anderson and Patrick Sandoval pitching, and the biggest area of struggle for the Rangers has been against left-handed pitching. So I wouldn't be surprised if they pitch decently well, and then, we're getting a battle of the bullpens, which the Angels have the worst bullpen in the league with a 5.17 ERA. You know who has the second worst? The Texas Rangers with a 5.05 ERA. So this is definitely a game where I would say live bet some overs. There's going to be a lot of late runs, even if we see, the random dual master classes from, I don't know, Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney or Patrick Sandoval and Jose Urena. Even if it's low scoring early, we're going to get some runs late. So those are my thoughts there. Next series up here is this Brewers-Astros series, which I don't have many thoughts on the last 2 games here. But the first game that we're staring at for game 1 today, Freddie Peralta against Hunter Brown. This game is around a pick'em, which I thought was really weird. Yes, the Astros still get a little bit of line respect. But seeing Freddie Peralta versus Hunter Brown, who everybody knows has struggled mightily this season. Yes, he's starting to look better as he's come back, but everybody kind of has that first stint in that 9-run first, I think it was, especially in their heads against the Royals. So seeing this game at pick'em really surprised me. And seeing some steam towards the Astros as well. There are some good matchup things to look forward to for the Houston Astros against Freddie Peralta. Strikeout stuff's been elite, but if you look at what the Astros do best, even though their offense as a whole has been very lackluster, I guess you can say this season. I'm going to pull it up right here. Against right-handed pitching, they don't strike out. They don't strike out at all. And they're lowest in the league with a 17.4% K rate. So Freddie Peralta, he's been fortunate enough to face a lot of teams that strike out a lot to start the season. And he hasn't really faced many teams that are kind of on the opposite end of this. So I do think the Astros can give him a little bit of trouble. It does help, I guess, in my mind, that even though they're playing the A's, a team that I think is kind of falling back down to earth, that the bats look much better, even though like they're doing this without Yordan really looking great at the plate. He had a brief little flash there where I was starting to buy in. Died pretty quickly, but Kyle Tucker's been great. Bregman looks so much better after a brutal start to the season. So I do think that they are giving some problems to Freddie Peralta starting today, which could be huge. It also helps that they're doing this at home. I would be a little more nervous if we were fading Freddie Peralta in Milwaukee, but we're not. So Astros, I think, start the series off with a bang, even though I don't think you're going to score a million runs off of Freddie Peralta. I think it's one of those where you see his pitch count get up pretty high, and they scratch a couple off of him. So that's all I have for, I believe, the second graphic here. Yeah. You can go ahead to the third one. Just save the 2 to the end over here that have already started in our 4-game series. So we'll talk about those 2. Maybe the last one that I have like big time thoughts on is this Red Sox Cardinal series. Shout out to B Camp. He wanted me to talk about the series a little bit, and I'll talk about the Cardinals because if you look at all their numbers, they are on the rise as an offense. And a lot of that came from, the Angels series. Some of it came from the Mets series, even though they lost that. But overall, as an offense, like their numbers have started ticking up ever since they lost that series to the White Sox. I'll tell you the reason that I'm not buying in. If you talk about who they're doing it off of, it's a lot of bullpen work, especially if you talk about what happened in that Angels series, because in order, like Jose Soriano went 5 scoreless. Reed Detmers had a little bit of a blow up. Something's wrong with Reed Detmers because he's been absolutely terrible. He gave up 4, but in the other, the final game of the series, like Griffin Canning went 6, gave up 1 run. So majority of these runs came off of the worst bullpen in the league, especially like the one that is the biggest example of that is Soriano going 5 scoreless in game 1, and then the bullpen giving up 10 runs after that. So they took advantage of the bullpen in some weird spots. Like, yes, I would say if you've actually watched Arenado and Goldie and some of the other guys in the lineup, like they look a little more comfortable like in the past week, but nothing major. So I'm not quite buying in yet. And I will say the one part that scares me a little bit about the series is the fact that you're probably going to lean on the bullpens a little bit, which for the Red Sox wouldn't usually scare me if they didn't just use their entire bullpen like I was talking about against the Rays in that series. But the key to the entire series, I think, is getting depth out of Brian Bayo starting tonight, which I think they do, because Brian Bayo, I think, has a really good matchup against this team. He's kind of fixed his lefty issues, which would be a problem against like a couple of guys in the Cardinals order. Realistically, like the damage is going to come from the righties, so it's not a huge asset in this matchup. But if we're talking about another guy who, just like the guy that's on the screen right now, Luis Severino, one of the keys to his success has also been keeping the ball on the ground, which has been the biggest advantage for him, 82nd percentile ground ball rate. So I do think he forces the Cardinals into a lot of soft contact in this matchup, and he kind of sets the tone, keeps the bullpen from being overexposed, and just does a really good job today. So that's where I would start. I think Cutter Crawford's a beautiful matchup for them as well. Miles Michaelis, I think, gets touched up by this Red Sox team a lot. So game 2, probably not a bad start or bad spot to buy in on the Red Sox on the road in that game. But I think it all starts tonight. So I do like this under in game 1, and rarely would I take that with a bullpen in the situation that the Red Sox are in. But I think Bayo keeps them in a good enough position. I think Kyle Gibson does well enough to kind of keep them in the game, and the Cardinals bullpen has been pretty solid as well. So I do like that under. I think it sets the Red Sox especially up well for the rest of the series. So that's where I'll go with that. Tigers D-backs, I guess maybe one series that I do have pretty big thoughts, but I like the goats in this series. Nothing complicated. We have Tariq Skubal going in game 1 tonight against this team, which usually a lefty against the D-backs, I wouldn't be thrilled with backing them really in any sort. But Tariq Skubal, even though he's facing a team who doesn't strike out all that much against lefties, which the D-backs are, he's faced kind of a murderer's row at this point of offenses. So the one thing that I've seen get better and better is his command of the strike zone, and he's using his fastball. That's been a lot better, working that up in the zone. So that really helps against low strikeout rate teams. So I'm not too scared of the D-backs. I'm a little scared of the Tigers offense if we're talking about backing them as a whole in that game. So that's probably what I'm not going to do. But I do think Tariq Skubal is a pretty good start. So I am in on him in game 1. And then probably my favorite pitcher, unfortunately, of the entire weekend slate, ZAC Gallen at home against the Tigers offense. I think he absolutely has a masterclass, which the Tigers, it's not really a hot take to say their offense has been absolutely awful and that I'm fading them. But coming into the start, like, first of all, you got ZAC Gallen coming back home, which he did just have a really good road start in Baltimore, but we all know we love to target him at home. That's where he has powers. It's his fortress. I think he gets us back against a pretty terrible Tigers offense right now, which you struggle with pitchers that overpower you. They haven't had many of those from the right side that they've faced as of recent. So I think this is the one that's really going to bite him in the ass. And just a guy like ZAC Gallen was really good command. I think that's a recipe for, Tiger strikeouts, but also a lot of soft contact because they bite to a lot of pitchers that have good command and can kind of nibble around the zone. That's ZAC Gallen's MO. So as much as I think we're going to see some regression coming out of him, especially starting in the second half of the season, I don't think this is the spot. I think he is going to absolutely shove against this Tigers team. Probably one of the best pitching performances of the weekend, I would say. And if I'm wrong, I will gladly be wrong. But I will be backing ZAC Gallen in a lot of ways. And you really want to get to him with like big time power lefties that, don't strike out all that much. You got a power lefty in like Riley Green, but outside of that, like the strikeouts are there for a bunch of guys in that lineup. And I do think like the soft contact is going to be a big thing against those lefties as well. So give me ZAC Gallen for a masterclass in that start. Like I said, I will gladly be wrong about that, but I don't think I will be. I think he has a really good start. So love Scooball, love Gallen, especially. Other than that, as far as the series goes, no real thoughts. I will be betting the D-backs and Gallen a lot of stuff on Saturday. Rockies, Giants. No big time thoughts here either. Rockies have back-to-back sweeps. Beat the Padres and Rangers, swept them both. They've won 7 in a row. Now they're going against the Giants, a team that, yes, they're playing in San Fran. So you're going to see lower total games, but they're just, I think, generally overvalued, especially when they play at home. So I have no interest in fading the Rockies really in this series, especially because a big reason for their success in this little 7-game winning streak has been their pitching staff. It's been surprisingly good. So even though we're seeing, which Ryan Feltner has been actually pretty decent, but Ty Black and Dakota Hudson, who's downright terrible, I have no interest in fading them and trying to find the sharp snap of the streak. So keep me away from that series. You can go to the 2 series that have already kind of started. Pirates, Cubs. Starts with today because, this game is pretty much at a pick 'em with Paul Skeens and Kyle Hendricks. I think that is up there with one of the most absurd lines we've had in the MLB this season. So still kind of diving into that one. I'm going to have to see how it pans out. But got to remember, like, as good as Skeens stuff looked in that first matchup, he did kind of fall apart towards the end. But this is also a rookie pitcher, a young pitcher, making his first 2 career starts against the same team within a week. And this one's on the road in Wrigley, which is a tough place to play. It's going to be good pitching weather, it seems, wind blowing in a little bit, which, it helps Skeens, but it helps Kyle Hendricks really that much more because he's the guy who's going to have the ball in play probably a little more than Paul Skeens and put the ball in the air as well. So helps Kyle Hendricks a little bit, does help Skeens too. But again, young pitcher facing the same team in his first 2 career starts within a week. Even if it's the Cubs offense who's been a little bit inconsistent and they're a little banged up right now, I have a tough time backing Paul Skeens in that game. So keep me away from that. Shota's probably going to throw a masterclass. Game 2, hot take there. Never really fading that guy. Don't have many thoughts, I guess, the rest of that series. Mitch Keller, Jameson Taillon. Everybody faded Mitch Keller in his last start because he was coming off a complete game masterclass. He shoved again. So I can probably tell you, I think that's a Turk fest between Keller and Taillon. Really hoping that there's going to be some wind blowing out in that game too. We can get a super high total, Wrigley game, but we'll likely be fading both of those pitchers in that game. And then to wrap it up, this Reds-Dodgers series, which everybody's already pissed about because they faded, the Reds bullpen game yesterday. A lot of people did. And what do you know? They came out and shoved. Like I was talking about with Nick Martinez in the bullpen, they're great. Starting today, though, you're going to get Frankie Montas against James Paxton. The James Paxton stuff can go so many different ways because he's a guy who's due for so much regression, but I don't know if it's going to come against a Reds team who's just been brutal against left-handed pitching. They've really struggled against like these finesse lefty type pitchers, which is why Jordan Montgomery, first time around, was really successful against them. Second time around, he got hit up a little more. But again, that's a product, I think, of facing the same team twice in a week. So James Paxton could have a really good start, but if the aggression starts to bite him in the ass, this could get very, very ugly. So it's been a long way of saying, like, in my heart, I think Paxton shoves. But if we finally start to see what we've all expected from Paxton, it could get, pretty ugly for him. And that would be fun to see. But yeah, other than that, I don't know how much heart I have to back the Reds offense in these games. I would love if yesterday was a big spark to the offense, even though they're not fully healthy right now, to kind of getting it going. But I don't know if I love any of these matchups for them. I definitely really like Yamamoto, which I believe that's the Sunday game. He's going up against Hunter Green. I would not mind backing an under in that game. Do think Hunter Green is going to pitch decently well, but Yamamoto kind of perfectly fits the mold for a guy that the Reds really struggle against from the right side. So even though he may give up a Turk or two. I do think that's a pretty good matchup for him. So that's kind of my takeaways there. Definitely a game-to-game basis. I would not be shocked to see Paxton and or Yamamoto pitch really, really well. Would not be surprised to see Ashcraft, randomly pitch well either on Saturday, but he's a guy either going to be really good or really bad, depending on what stuff you get. So a lot of unknown for this series as a whole. Definitely pay attention to how the bullpen for the Reds is utilized in this game 2 with Frankie on the mound, because if he's not able to give them enough innings, they're going to be compromised for the rest of this series. And Ashcraft and Hunter Green have been decent innings eaters. But again, if it gets ugly for them, it gets ugly for really everybody. So those are kind of my thoughts on these series. I think we've gone through them all. Appreciate you guys joining for another little series preview. We're going to talk about these on BTL starting today. So we'll have all the bets for game 1s kind of fleshed out, and we'll talk about on, posting on Twitter what exactly I'm doing for the rest of these series. I will definitely be in on the ZAC GALLEN Masterclass, which may surprise a lot of people. On Saturday, that'll probably be the story of it for me, story of the weekend as well. But I think we got some solid angles in these games. Like I said, appreciate you guys for joining. We're going to continue to do these, continue to touch on some nugs for all of these series, and we will see you for the next one coming on Monday. W's.